So thank you, everybody, for coming. There. And welcome to our guests from Nebraska Zen Center. And I should say, because not everybody might know, Zen Master Sung-san, who Ting referred to in her talk, he was the founder of our school. He was one of the, or maybe the first Korean Zen master to teach in the so-called West. It always depends what direction you're pointing, right? Are there any questions? Yes, Liz.
Okay, so this was my question anyway, but Ting's story also reminded me of this. And so, you know, at the Quantum School has the 360 Zen classes. So every month there's a class. And this month was Reverend Shinshu Roberts, who's a priest, right? And she had said, you know, and I've heard of this before, Dogen's statement of the world worlding the world.
Mm-hmm.
And so what is your understanding of that? And it seemed like Ting's story was really touching on that, but maybe not, I don't know. So what your thoughts, I would be interested.
Well, I'm not a Dogen scholar, and I'm not a philosopher, so I can't really say what Dogen means by that. Dogen was very famous for creating his own sort of language. I mean, the world worlding the world, you say, well, that's weird English, but maybe in Chinese, because he wrote in Chinese, maybe in Chinese but no, it isn't. I mean, he did things like this all the time. He made sort of very strange ways of speaking or writing in order to encompass ideas that are not very congenial to standard grammar and standard vocabulary. So I could tell you what I think it means, but why does this matter? You know? What every teaching is pointing to is wake up. Wake up and help this world, which is what Zen Master Sung-san would always say. Zen means attain your true self and help this world. So worlding the world, I could tell you what I think it means, but I don't think that's relevant. Its purpose is to make us question our ideas about what the world is, what this world is made out of, how this world functions. That's its purpose. And all Zen teaching, and much of Buddhist teaching, consists of trying to cut through our language, our thinking, our assumptions. You know, you'll hear Buddhist teachers say things like, you know, time and space do not exist, or you make time and space, and you say, what, time and space? I mean, space, it's so obvious. I mean, I'm sitting over here and Jane is over there and there's space between us, and, you know, I didn't make that up. And time, you know, we sat for, 25 minutes or something like that? I didn't make up that time, you know, I didn't make that up. But the whole way of thinking in terms of time and space actually is something that we make. And we don't realize it. That's how fundamental it is. So there's all this, you know, you can bring in like contemporary science, but the ancient Buddhist teachers and whoever wrote the sutras, it wasn't Buddha and it wasn't Ananda either, whoever wrote the sutras, they knew all this stuff. You know, you do this research and it turns out that this part of the brain, you know, I'm simplifying, this part of the brain is aware of space and this part of the brain is aware of time. That means you make it. If you didn't have a human brain or a mammal brain or some kind of brain with similar sort of structure, you would not have time and space. We would see, you know, if you were crawling on the floor like some kind of bug or something. I don't know how bugs perceive time and space, but if you were something like that, you know, be crawling along the floor and we would see you moving through space and in time, but you might not perceive yourself that way. So everything is pointing to cutting through this cutting through our belief that our perceptions and our cognition are the only way to describe the world, and that they are an accurate way of describing the world. Now we have to function, so I have to know that I'm here and Jane's over there, and if I want to hand Jane something, I have to actually get up to hand it to her because she's too far for me to reach, you know? Todd, I think I could reach, but yeah, so that's what they're pointing to. And when Dogen says worlding the world, what that seems to point to me, I said I wasn't going to tell, but I will, it seems to point to this kind of very fertile, constantly productive, constantly changing, constantly arising of codependent origination, to use a technical term, the way emptiness functions. You know, there's a wonderful metaphor from quantum physics that, you know, space is actually not empty. I mean, this is quantum physics. Quantum physics says space is actually not empty. Constantly, you know, little tiny subparticles, you know, quantum type particles, not even like electrons and things even smaller than that. That these things are constantly arising like a foam and disappearing, and constantly arising like a foam. You know, that the universe sort of gives birth to itself constantly. And that's very close to the Buddhist concept of emptiness. That emptiness is what allows things to interact and to appear and to disappear. That, so this worlding itself, to me, it brings up this image of the universe constantly creating itself on the smallest level. You know, not that the universe, you know, disappears and comes back, disappears and comes back, but more like it's constantly, you know, this fertile thing that we think is empty, and it's fertile all the time. That's what I think. But I'm not a Dogen scholar. But this is very strong in the Mahayana, this notion of this constant bringing about existence constantly. And things interacting on a level that we can't really speak. So that's what I have to say about that. I can Shunshu's a personal friend, so I can send her the tape of this talk, you know, the video, and I can say, Shunshu, did I do okay? Yeah. Yeah, we were very lucky to have Shunshu do that. She's really great. Are there any other questions? Yes.
What is the relationship between emptiness and interconnectedness?
What is the relationship between emptiness and interconnectedness? Emptiness is the reason that interconnectedness can happen. If things were not empty, then if things had some kind of substance, some real substance, like little marbles, then how could they interconnect? They just bounce off each other. Like, you know, billiard table, the balls hit the balls and they go all over the place. Yeah. So they're intimately related. You should read Nagarjuna, Fundamental Wisdom of the Middle Way, translated by J. Garfield. Best explication of this ever. Not that I've read very many of them, but it's really wonderful. So, thank you. Boy, we're intellectual today. You know, usually people say, oh, my life is falling apart, what should I do? But okay. Any other questions? No other questions? Yes.
Hi, this is Sean here.
Yes, Sean.
Hi, Judy. Just want to comment on that book you mentioned, the Fundamentals Wisdom of the Middle Way.
Uh-huh.
Past 3 years, I think I pick up that book at least 5 times. Every time I read about it, couldn't really understand it. I mean, the language is there, but I couldn't grasp the meaning, so I put it down. I'm thinking maybe 6 months later, read it again. Hasn't been able to get very far. Should I just, you know, just leave it and then naturally pick up later to see, or is there something I need to do to be able to understand it?
You don't need to read any book. That's just nobody ever needs to read any books, however they help. So that's a very interesting thing that you bring up, because some things speak to some people and other things speak to other people. I practiced for about 10 years before I could read any sort of thing like a sutra or a commentary on a sutra or something like Nagarjuna. For the first 10 years that I practiced, I read, Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind by Shunryu Suzuki, who was a great Soto teacher in California, from Japan, and founder of San Francisco Zen Center. And, that really helped my practice. And I would read sort of kind of practical Buddhist books, like a lot of Joko Beck's books, things like that, things that pointed to sort of how to meditate, how to live your life, things like that. But the abstract philosophical stuff, it just didn't make sense to me. Just like for you, Nagarjuna doesn't make sense to you. And then all of a sudden one day, I don't know whether it was the Diamond Sutra, I don't know what it was, but somehow I picked up something, and all of a sudden now I know what they're talking about. So it's like everybody has different karma, and certain things will open one person's mind and another person's mind gets shut by that. Like, what is this, So just believe in yourself. If something doesn't encourage you to practice, then don't bother with it. There's another thing. There's some people who are very intellectual. I was a mathematician. Mathematicians are not intellectual. We're mathematicians, right? But people who have a sort of philosophical bent or something like that, and they'll read something and they'll get all caught up in the philosophy of it, and it goes right up here into their frontal lobes. And then they, can talk and talk and talk and talk and talk and analyze and analyze and analyze, but they don't understand where it's pointing. So they say, oh, I love that book by, that Garfield's translation of Nagarjuna. I love that book. And they'll talk on and on and on and on, but they don't understand where it's coming from. There are all these stories in Zen, where the sutra master comes down the mountain and he's got his sutras, or he's walking, the famous story of Doksan, coming. He was a great sutra master, and he hears that the monks in South China, they just sit facing the wall. And he was a great diamond sutra master. He was a specialist, And so, he's carrying he's got his big sack or backpack or whatever it is with all his books and his commentaries on his books, and he's going to walk south, and he's going to, hit these, renegade monks who don't know what Buddhism is, because all they do is sit facing a wall. And, and then he encounters the woman who runs the tea house, and, he's kind of hot and bothered, and he's, hungry, and, oh, wonderful, Diamond Sutra Master, thank you. If you answer a question, then your meal is free, and if you answer it incorrectly, no meal. And he says, oh, I'm a great Diamond Sutra Master, ask me any question, And so she says, okay, Diamond Sutra says, past mind cannot be grasped, present mind cannot be grasped, future mind cannot be grasped. With what kind of mind will you eat your lunch? He has no idea. He can't answer that question. So he says, who's your teacher, please? And she says, oh, up that mountain over there. So he goes, and of course he becomes a Zen master, a very great Zen master, and he burns his books. So it's a wonderful story. But yeah, so there were all these stories about how thinking cannot help you see where to go. And of course, this is propaganda. I have a lot of respect for people in any form of Buddhism. Sutra's fine, Pure Land's fine, everything's fine, Anything, there are many, many ways to wake up, and use the one that helps you. But if you find that Zen is what helps you, and you find that you can't read a particular book, then don't read it. And maybe someday you'll be surprised. You know, maybe in 10 years, 15 years, you'll open up that book and you say, wow, this is really cool, you know? And maybe you won't. Yeah, I have this interesting relationship with the Avatamsaka Sutra that I teach classes in it actually, but I've never read it like from page 1 to page 1250 or whatever. It's really long, large pages, small type. And I delve into it, and I think it's just wonderful, the parts that I'm focused on, but then it's like other parts, my eyes will just glaze over. You know, I keep going back to it and going back to it and going back to it. And friends of mine who have had monastic training in Asia tell me that, like for example, in the Korean monk and nun schools, not our school in Korea, but the Choge order, when you go to their training for being a monastic, you will have sutra training, but your sutra training largely consists of chanting. It's not analysis. You chant these sutras, and you chant these sutras. I can't say over and over because you can't chant the Avatamsaka Sutra over and over. That would be all you did for like 5 years or something, because it's so long. But you know, people, it's like you absorb them. You're not expected to have this intellectual understanding. You're expected to kind of absorb them simply by chanting them. It's very interesting. You know, we don't do very much of that, of absorbing the notion that by chanting something or reciting something, you absorb it. We don't really have that in our culture. Although maybe because we're always chanting the Heart Sutra, maybe the Heart Sutra kind of sinks in like that. I don't know. My experience was I fell in love with the Heart Sutra the first time I saw it, so, you know, but I'm weird. No eyes, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind. Yes! So, are there any other questions? Yes?
So maybe along a similar vein, is there anything that helps with decision making?
Is there anything that helps with decision making? You make decisions? Yeah, you think you make decisions. So I'm going to go back to science. There's this wonderful experiment. It was really a long time ago, like when they were first starting to wire up people's brains, where they told they'd wired somebody's brain and muscle and stuff, and they told them to like choose, like there were 2 options and they had to choose one, and they discovered that the muscle fired before the brain did. So, yeah, we have this model of making decisions, and we need this model in order to function. You know, you can't just sit back passively and wait. You have to make decisions, and you bring your brain into the process. But I don't have any suggestions on telling you what house to buy or who to marry or whether you should quit your job or what school you should send your kid to or where you should go for lunch or how you should make those decisions. I have no suggestions about that except one. And that is to have a very strong center. If you act from your center, then whether it works out or not, you can deal with it. If you don't act from your center, then if a decision is painful, even if it's just temporarily painful, if it causes some kind of difficulty, then you won't be able to deal with it. You'll be berating yourself constantly. So you have to believe in yourself, and you have to have a strong center. And the thing about having a strong center, unfortunately, is not something you can do overnight. It's not like popping a pill. A lot of my friends, you know, because of politics is so frightening right now, really frightening. And a lot of my friends, and I'm sure many people in this room have experienced this, friends come to you and they say, how am I going to get through this? What can I do? Will meditation help? And the answer is yes, meditation will help, but it's long term. It's not like, you know, sit quietly for 10 minutes and then you'll be fine. Or even sit quietly for an hour and then you'll be fine. Or even sit quietly for a half hour every day for a week and you'll be fine. So, it's very much like nobody goes to the gym and expects to, lift 100-pound weights the first time they come in, unless, they were able to do it before they came in, right? So it's the same thing. So making that commitment to practice and practicing faithfully over time, every day. I'll tell you my suggestion: 4 great vows, a certain number of prostrations, maybe 3, maybe 9, maybe 27, 108, that would be great. And then sit for 20 minutes and do that every day. And over time, your center becomes stronger. But there's no magic bullet. I'm sorry. It'd be nice if there were, but there's no magic bullet. Thank you. And we're out of time, so Liz, could you turn the